So thank you, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of Zappix and Caresoft Technology, we would like to welcome you to our webinar, AI in Government. A sitting state CDO shares what's actually working in citizen engagement and what isn't. And just to tell you a little bit about Caresoft, we are the trusted government IT solutions provider supporting federal, state, local government, education, healthcare, and private sector industries. And we connect our customers across the US and Canada with thousands of technology vendors, resellers, systems integrators, managed service providers to deliver a comprehensive range of solutions and services to meet organizations' needs. Caresoft, in conjunction with our vendor partners, is pleased to host and sponsor thousands of educational and informational events each year, ranging from webinars like today's to accredited trainings, trade shows, roundtable discussions, technology forums, users groups, and more. Caresoft holds a wide variety of schedules, contracts, and purchasing agreements that streamline and simplify the IT procurement process. As the master government aggregator for our vendor, reseller, and integrator partners, Caresoft has assembled a comprehensive IT solutions portfolio that includes products and services across multiple technology verticals to support organizations with mission-focused solutions. This includes many verticals such as cybersecurity, FinOps, multi-cloud, DevSecOps, artificial intelligence, geospatial, customer experience, and more. All right, so with that all being said, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. Janak Joshi, the Chief Digital Officer at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Yossi Abraham, the President and CEO at Zappix.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. As Shota said, I'm Yossi Abraham. I'm the President and CEO of Zappix, and we're here today with Caresoft for what I think is going to be really a genuinely useful conversation. It's not a sales pitch. It's a really frank look at what it actually takes to make AI work in government. I've been in the customer and citizen engagement space for years, and the questions I hear most often from leaders, IT leaders, are, is my organization ready for AI? What will the real cost be? Where does it deliver value versus maybe just smarter automation? And our guest today, Janak, is someone that has actually done the work. As Chief Digital Officer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, he has deployed both AI and digital engagements across state agencies serving 7 million residents. Not a proof of concept, a real deployment at real scale. He has also been nominated for different task force on AI, and I will actually let you, Janak, introduce yourself. So if you can, in 60 seconds, introduce yourself and tell us why AI in government matters to you personally.
Thank you very much, Yossi. Really appreciate it. As Yossi indicated, I'm responsible for the delivery and the operations side of all the digital initiatives for the state of Massachusetts. I serve as the deputy for the agency that serves up a lot of the common technologies across the state agencies and the citizens. I was recently nominated for the White House AI Task Force. And I would say that, I come from the private sector, and I specifically come from venture capital and private equity backed companies as well as an investor. So I don't want to run this conversation, like Yossi said, as kind of a formal podcast type of a conversation. This is informal. We'll tell it like it is. And also, all the opinions are my personal opinions. They don't necessarily represent my employer or anybody else. So, but having said that, I think, AI in government is incredibly time critical, and we are at an inflection point where there are several tasks within state and federal governments that can greatly benefit from the type of technologies that are already out there that are GA for assisting citizens, accessing content, assisting citizens, answering questions, streamlining agency operations, addressing security concerns, and more. So having said that, let's go ahead straight into the conversation.
Okay, so let's start. So let's set the context first. Government technology leaders are being told that AI is transformative, it's essential, it's urgent. but data on the ROI of it, the return on investment of it is let's say complicated. So let's talk about where we are now. And in the past, I've heard you say that you have compared the AI inflection point to the early internet days, that the same type of energy, similar growing pains, and so on. Can you share your thoughts on that and what government leaders need to really understand regarding this domain?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that the word inflection point is right, and I am comparing this to the early 2000, late 90s, early 2000, because the scale of penetration of this technology is almost 20x compared to what happened in the late 90s and early 2000, which means that e-commerce and web access was not as pervasive unless you were an enterprise user or unless you were a very sophisticated user. And there was a demographic cutoff for who had access to this technology 25 years ago. Well, in 2026 and beyond, my 13-year-old nephew has access to GPT, Claude, Nano Banana, and Codex. My 13-year-old nephew also creates apps to sell things, which means that the pervasiveness of this technology and the sophistication and the maturity with which the industry and the vendors are approaching the next tranche of the roadmap is very critical for us to think about. Like the saying goes, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And in government, we have to absolutely pay attention to this, because the speed with which we can deliver the technology, the speed with which we can risk mitigate security concerns, the speed with which we can engage consumers, the citizens, the constituents, and the ability for governments to mitigate and disintermediate potential resource gaps, capacity gaps, is what this technology promises to address. I would say, in terms of the maturity of a lot of this technology, depending on how you use it and where you use it, it could be very mature or really kind of low end of the maturity curve. So, because AI is not a product, it's not a platform, AI is a framework.
Yes.
And how you tune and calibrate the framework really depends on the use case.
And I love this slide that you provided that shows really the unprecedented speed of AI as compared to almost everything else that was there in the past.
Yeah, I mean, this diagram is really telling, because the internet took almost 15 years between 2000 to, I would say, 2015, 2016 to really hit the critical path as far as digital supply chain is concerned, e-commerce is concerned, etc. But if many of you who are regular users of GPT and Claude, you will, or even Gemini, you will notice that now there are ads, and the ads are contextual, and the context essentially has an e-commerce and a transaction attribute to it. And these attributes essentially are how consumers are going to be used to buying things, interacting with things, engaging with things, and communicating with things. So imagine you're a younger constituent 10 years out. If you're already used to engaging in a GPT format, the expectation is very mature. It's like, how do I engage with you in a meaningful way? How do I very quickly get to the answers in a multimodal way? What are my omni-channel responsibilities? None of which existed 25 years ago.
Absolutely. Most of it didn't exist 3-4 years ago. So yes.
Right.
Yes. So, but when we're talking about AI, it's both in the private sector, but also in government. There is still a question about the ROI. And does it really prove itself or prove to the CFOs that AI does really have a good positive ROI? From your vantage point, from the CDO office, what is driving this gap?
So there are a couple of things. If you go to the next slide, the AI, I don't want to use the word hype because it almost sounds dismissive, but AI as a technology was heavily sold to us as the end all be all, pixie dust, silver bullet solution. Now, those of us who've been in technology long enough know that that's never really the case. At the end of the day, this is still software. So the two big observations with AI is that the cost argument, the compute cost, utilization cost, the cost of tokens, etc., is really higher than what people think or make it out to be. So if a vendor says that, oh, our models run in memory and are really efficient at running the algorithms in a way that can give you the best yield possible compared to any other vendor, I would really question that, because the reality is that the vendors themselves don't know the answers of what driving up the cost many times.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, the use case context is very important. If you're trying to mitigate and answer a few questions on a chatbot, for example, is very different than trying to troubleshoot a tier 3 ticket for a consumer who has an edge case. In fact, that the edge cases, we might land up seeing cost people 3, 4, or even 10x more than anything else. We also noticed that the expectations around ROI are also multimodal, which means that consumers expect the conversations to be had not just in a web-based app, but inside an app, a dedicated app, or text-based, etc. We don't have that for Massachusetts, but I know many other states have had. California, New York, Texas, Illinois, Florida has some of those. But understand that every modality that you open up increases utilization, and increases utilization increases the cost of compute. I would also say that the level of complexity and the maturity with which the constituents are asking some of these questions is going high. It's not as simple as, hey, I want to get my status update for a transaction I'm expecting. The answer is, how do I qualify for something? And most times chatbots, just respond with a link. That's not going to be enough, because that essentially increases the call volume, which is what we are trying to mitigate in the first place. So I would say that overall, the cost component has suddenly become very important, because behind all the pilot sprawl, behind all the tool first adoption, like you see on the screen here, when it comes to reality, your cost is exponential. And now governments and private companies are both beginning to question, saying, well, is it really necessary to put AI across every use case? Let's put instead of AI first, the intent should be AI where necessary.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a good time to take our first polling question. Shota, do you want to present the first question?
Yes. Let me go ahead and launch that, and it should pop up on your screen here in a moment.
Okay, so please answer it. We'll give you like half a minute to go over it. It's basically, which of the following is your biggest AI challenge currently? And you can say that you are still in the pilot or experimentation phase. You've already deployed, but ROI is unclear. Data quality and governance readiness, and the organizational buy-in. What are the major challenges you're in now? I'll give it several seconds, and then we can move on.
All right, I'm going to leave it up for about 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll.
Thank you. So one of the numbers you have showed, Janak, was that AI-powered self-service in some cases is 15 to 20% more expensive than human-supported or automation for low complexity tickets. So let's have an honest conversation about the ROI. A lot of organizations still calculate ROI the old way, the entire project cost divided by project savings, etc. You have argued that this is fundamentally broken. So what's wrong with that math, and how do you view a better ROI for math to look like?
So to assume that ROI calculations based on per seat or per utilization is going to work in the AI space is an incorrect assumption. I'm not saying SaaS is dead, but I think it's evolved to a very different sphere of how you calculate your budgets and forecast based on the complexity of utilization. So, number one, the projected ROI around the complexity of the use case of how many parameters you're integrated with, how many data assets you are referencing, what does the integration profile look like, and plus, what's the learning algorithm or the complexity of the learning algorithm that's going to improve the yield, really identifies the ROI. So I would say that the number one issue around ROI is data quality remediation. If you have bad quality, and if customers are churning and yielding results in bad quality, your ROI will never have the right result. You will always be in the red. So data quality is absolutely number one on the priority, and that's why I had put that as a hidden cost driver, which usually you never think about it. Process reengineering. I mean, a lot of things in AI is around changing your workflows. Things that were manual become automated. Things that were automated now you don't even see it. I love the saying from one of my favorite software designers in Oracle, which is the best experience is no experience. He landed up going to Tesla, where he says that imagine the car is actually communicating with you that you should leave now, otherwise you'll get late because it's synced with your calendar. So there is no experience. I'm not asking the car. It's participatory AI. So the best experience is no experience. And that's really attributes to the second point about under hidden cost drivers, which is process reengineering. Really think through what stage gates and what decision events are going to be disintermediated and what is the cost around that. Talent upskilling and agent fluency. I'm a big believer in like agentic fluency is going to be very, very important over the next 36 months. Over the next 16 months, it will almost be table stakes. It'll be like putting on your resume saying, I know Microsoft Excel or Word. Nobody cares. It's assumed, it's implied. So I would say that the cost of talent upskilling, because now you have to wait 3 months, 6 months until people are agentically fluent in the kind of tasks that you're expecting them to do. And security monitoring and audit infrastructure is also very important because the ability for us to identify multiple ports that may have been open or multiple security protocols that may come up as a result of AI or different third-party components that may be in use is pretty exponential. A single model can use close to 20, 30, 40 different APIs. And I would say that I'm not a big fan of vendor lock-ins. It's kind of like saying that, hey, ChatGPT has its right and that's the only AI that's ever going to work. Said nobody. Just like we are in a hybrid cloud, we are in a hybrid best of breed environment for other capabilities. We are going to be in a hybrid AI environment, which means that your integration overhead and your context overhead is something that you really need to think about. And change management across the agencies, right? Like the case management systems from agency 1 to agency 2 to agency 3 may really differ in their capabilities. Not the old CRM systems, the ERP systems, the the general ledger systems, they're not really AI ready. If you have systems that are not AI native, and at least from those incumbent vendors like Oracle and SAP, it might take them 3 or 6 months. So talk to the product managers and the product and account teams from those vendors to say, hey, we are trying to do X, Y, and Z. What is your readiness profile associated with it? And I've given a little math calculation on the left-hand side saying that if you have 50, 100, 200 budgets, the ability for us to get into what I'm calling as combinatorial effects and shifting priorities for the math are almost impossible as a human task. So I would say that think about ROI calculations and how you think about that as a part of your AI project. In fact, if you're in GPT or Claude, build your financial model and your ROI model by inputting all the variables and integration endpoints inside GPT itself. And it'll spit out a spreadsheet model, and you'll be fascinated how different it looks compared to what you have been doing the last 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. I think there are so many things that are different today than what they were 10 years ago. And we have to take that into account when we look at overall, the project life cycle, and the lifetime of the project itself. So before any government leader will deploy an AI, there is some fundamental readiness questions that most vendors will not come and ask. Um, can you elaborate a bit about how you view AI readiness? And I know that you have built a 4-tier model thinking about that. So if you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could really bring in the team that I'm working with rather than me. I'm more on the architect, not as the builder, but here's the input from some of the people I've interacted with in the industry and who have done this well. I would say that every vendor will have a readiness checklist.
Yeah.
Some will call it a, implementation and deployment prereqs. Some will call it a, go live prereq, etc. But this is the summary of what you will see in the industry. The data foundation, the taxonomies, the standards with which you approach it, your reference architecture, believe it or not, reference architecture, your RA is absolutely critical path here. Your bias assessment before any model training, all that has to kind of play out well. Define an inventory of the use cases you want to address. If you have 5 use cases, and see if the current data foundations marry up to those use cases in a meaningful way. The second piece is, once you have the use cases, you will have a workflow design. You will have kind of a daisy chain of cause and effect, saying, well, if I do X, Y will result. If I do Y, the result is 0 or 1. If 1, do X, etc. That workflow design is incredibly important because AI has an incredible ability to go through different stage gates in a very meaningful and contextually relevant way. However, understand that all the AI frameworks today, again, I'm using the word framework because it's not a product, it's not a platform, are probabilistic. There are some vendors who will identify as a deterministic model, but outside of drug development and defense, I've never seen that in government. So these are probabilistic workflow designs, which means that you will always have to check for biases. And the vertical integration is also very important because, like, how vertically deep you want to get into it. Do you want to only tackle tier 1 tickets or tier 1 responses, or you want to go all the way down to tier 3 tickets? Very important. The last piece, number 3, is the accountability framework. What is the observability and what is the audit capability associated with different vendors? If you're in a multi-AI environment, do you have an enterprise common audit framework? Do you have kind of rollback capabilities associated with governance models? Do you have, the kind of training that the staff will need every 90 days? Because this is not like a Cisco training like we used to have 20 years ago. You can't be trained once, certified once, and you are fluent. Nope. The pace, the rapid, and the incredibly sophisticated pace of the roadmap development is a forcing function of the fact that you have to train your staff every 90 to 120 days. Everything that we used to know 90 or 4 months ago is completely different. 4 months ago, we were saying ChatGPT is the king. And now Claude has come out to be the winner because of their roadmap. So I would say that the AI readiness is not just a checklist, but it's a foundational culture change in how you approach your business.
And I do want to show your maturity model if you want to go over it.
Yeah, so I will very quickly go over this. The definition of ungoverned, reactive, governed, AI native, I mean, these are my personal definitions, but I would say that by design, most state and even federal government agencies are kind of ungoverned when we combine them. For example, I worked a lot with the FDA and the CDC and the NIH before I came to state government. Well, none of those 3 agencies really talk to each other. There are data silos across all 3, and they still exist. It doesn't mean that the agency itself is ungoverned. It means that the maturity with which the expectations are set in the world of AI appear to be ungoverned when we marry up a lot of those assets. So I would say that currently most state and federal agencies are between mitigating the ungoverned nature and going to more reactive, but very quickly some of the larger states, and I have seen this very closely with California, Texas, New York, who have one of the biggest AI budgets in the country, go from reactive to governed. And literally, we're talking about 18 months from now. This is not a 3-year, 5-year roadmap. This is 6 quarters or less. And if you find any AI native state government stack, please let me know. I haven't come across it, not even in Dubai or Singapore. But I would say that we are right in the middle between ungoverned and reactive and very quickly moving to tier 3. And again, across specific use cases, this is not a complete digital transformation. That is a misnomer. That's a marketing term. That is not reality. There is no AI transformation happening across every use case and across every agency. That is incorrect.
I totally agree with that. And it is encouraging yet to see governments and the public sector moving ahead, because this is what we as citizens would always like. Even in the enterprise world, I think this governance model is so accurate. And we see a lot of different companies at different stages. Maybe there are a lot of startups that are AI native, but they are not long established companies that are serving millions of clients like the government sector is for their citizens.
Yeah, and very quickly, I would say the commercial sector, including in every industry. I mean, I'll give a concrete example. The house behind me belongs to a 7th-generation lobster fisherman, and I had a conversation with him because he has been operating since the 1800s fishing lobsters. He has sensors in his lobster's traps. I don't know if you can see the lobster's traps. Yeah. That is connected to an AI model that measures the size of the lobster, because unless the lobster is a particular size, you're not allowed to fish. So he has over 1,000 traps here, and he measures every lobster in 3 dimensions, and it'll give him a feed in real time so he can go in the boat and pick them up. So the maturity with which even an incumbent industry like lobster fishing is so far ahead that you cannot even conceptualize that a sensor is embedded with computer vision to fish for a fisherman. So I would say that that's where we are moving in the industry. By the way, he has no college education and no software background.
Amazing example. I think it's a great time to take a pause and have the second polling question. So, Shota, if you want to put it up. Perfect. Yep. So, what governance tier would you think best describes your agency today? Is it ad hoc, tier 1, tier 2, some standards, but fragmented, tier 3, validated data, and tier 4, fully AI native? So we'll allow you 20 to 30 seconds to go over it and answer your question. Okay, can we move ahead, Shota? Perfect. So let's talk real world. Let's get concrete. Massachusetts is one of the states that has actually deployed AI in some meaningful scale, not just pilot. Can you walk us through what it looked like on the ground? Through the deployment, what problems you were solving, how did you actually build it, and how long did it take?
Yeah. So the foundation for any state government is to improve accessibility for their constituents, where the constituents are able to very quickly and meaningfully access the state services across different agencies, which essentially means that communication becomes the number one protocol for how we engage citizens. So, RMV is one example of many, but we wanted a better experience for the constituents to be able to answer questions, to engage with constituents about different and high complexity questions, et cetera. So we had a chatbot on mass.gov. I would say that some of the operational parameters for launching a chatbot in state government was really have meaningful buy-in from the agency leadership, and do a content review, not just an accessibility review, but a content review, because we realized that historically, many of the content that's on state agency websites is not really updated that often, etc. I'd like to say Massachusetts was one of the top ones and the better ones. But I have interacted with folks in Michigan and Ohio and Nevada and New Mexico where they haven't touched the content in over 10 years. So if you guys are from those states where you don't have regular content updates, you develop what we call as a content debt, not just a tech debt. So I would say that was number one, because that yields better context sensitivity and better engagement correlation. So, and the intent behind this was to free up the agents for high complexity use cases, so the agents themselves can feel, the call center agents, not the AI agents, can feel that they're doing meaningful work, that they're doing high quality work, and they're upskilling. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I would say that it also allows the chatbot also allowed us, once launched, to very quickly identify what were the core and foundational issues that the constituents were facing. So it was not just a tool that was thrown across the fence, but it's also getting real-time feedback on how people are interacting. But the data prop, the workflow design, the process mapping, the use case definitions, etc., I would say took about 50 or 60% of the time. And then the development of the model, the deployment, the post-deployment validation, the post-implementation kind of refinement, etc., became very, very critical path. And we are on a cadence, and we take real-time feedback. We don't have like a set release schedule that every 6 weeks or 4 weeks we have a release, because that world of release sprints in AI is almost, I don't want to say non-existent, but it becomes a moot point, saying, well, everything's working, because foundationally AI is a learning model. So it's automatically adjusting the models on the fly without you releasing any net new software. So unless there is a UX change or UI change, or unless there is a foundational change in the framework, we don't want to do that. But I would say that the intent behind the chatbot for all state agencies, just like corporations, should be multi-agency, multi-departmental workflows at the end. So this is stage one of like a very ambitious and a very meaningful agenda for the future that I hope every state in the country adopts.
Absolutely. And one of the things we hear a lot in government and enterprise with the enterprise technology leaders is we want to AI everything. But that's probably not the right thing to do, because there are things that you should AI, there are things you should automate, there are things you might want to leave for humans. So what is your view on that?
Yeah. Constituents, agencies, corporations look at state governments and federal governments in a way that no other corporation, for-profit corporation, can imagine. They look at state governments as kind of like a guiding light to say, what should we do? What is the best practice? Should there be a policy? Should there be some guidance? Should there be some language, etc.? So I would say there are certain things where AI adds tremendous value. I don't want to repeat every one of these line items here, but I will mention two things from what's green here. Is the complex decision support. I really think the reason why it's number one is because the speed, the scale with which it can really address this is going to be unprecedented. And I'm not looking at what we can do now. I'm looking at the roadmaps across the vendors, and I'm looking at what it will be doing 18 months from now. And the second piece, I would say that the pattern recognition scale. There is no human who can look at 1 million conversations in under 30 seconds and summarize it and tell you how your model should be tweaked. Million conversations, right? And it will identify false positives, false negatives, etc. So I think the first one and the last one, and everything in between is table stakes. But that's where I would say, and the no-go decision is, you got to be very careful in the bias management for AI. I would say that the commercially biased content targeting is very real, because that's how the vendors make money. They don't have any malicious intent. That's just their business model. So I would really talk to the vendors to say, like, okay, well, who's the sponsor of this content if you're using a third party, are certain content and data types going to be prioritized more than the other, etc. And I would say that the second thing is you can't bypass the review gates. So your registered model, I mean, if you look at the last bullet point, I mean, these are a little bit of a technical terms, but a lot of your registered model cards and the dual approval process associated with some of these models need a committee. So have a content review committee, have a model committee, and understand which cases should really be attributed to an AI model and which cases should have human in the loop or human alone. I don't like the term human in the loop because there are many areas in many ways where you don't need AI. You don't It's kind of like using a flamethrower to light a cigarette many times. So I don't think it's necessary. And never publish unvalidated, patient or citizen content. You don't want any content to be published or reference to the model that nobody's reviewed, that nobody can get to. That is generally a bad idea.
Yeah. And I also like the simple automation for low complexity use cases that you don't need to consume tokens and all the energy that is needed for AI. If it's a simple use case that can be done with RPA, robotic process automation, or simple automation there.
Yeah, and I would also say that, I mean, this is just a personal opinion. There's no need to say please and thank you. If I combine all the please and thank yous across all the models, we've literally punched a hole in the ozone. So no need for that. It's a software.
It won't get offended. So let's take let's push the last question, the last polling question, and then we'll talk about how we see the future. So last question is, where is AI on your organization's priority list for citizen engagement? Is it already an active deployment? Is it in the planning, just exploration, or not currently a priority? Again, we'll give it 20, 30 seconds. And this is the last polling question for today. Okay. Let's move ahead. So the last part of our conversation is, you describe the future where the question isn't how much AI, but it's how to balance AI, automation, humans, and so on. In your view, how will it look like in 3 years from now for government agencies?
I would say that you will be in a multi-vendor environment, which means that it's going to be a forcing function for establishing really solid governance and observability foundations. Without that, it's going to be very difficult to deploy your technology, because the last thing you want is have no ability to replicate or reproduce any potential issues or bugs or intent biases that may come up from the AI models. The second piece I would say is the horizontal tool adoption is easy. A vendor can go in and say, okay, 5, 6, 7 agencies are now using it. The question is, how are they using it? How verticalized is that tool? How well integrated is that tool? And what does that integration actually represents to the constituent experience? I think that's going to be very important. The methodology, the instrumentation behind the human agent orchestration is going to be important, because the ROI is directly corresponds to how well distributed your AI models are. So the vendors love it. However, when you're spending money and you're anticipating a projected cost 2x, 3x, 5x based on things that you could do normally, or you don't really need AI to do, that gets into a very painful exercise, because once people are used to a tool, it's very difficult to roll it back. Very difficult. You're giving literally a Ferrari in the hands of everybody. So be careful.
Yes.
Because you cannot give a Ferrari and then say, no, now you're going to drive, Toyota Corolla. And The last piece I would say that the orchestration is important, where we assume and inject human judgment and oversight versus where we can have fully autonomous AI bots, where we expect agentic fluency versus where we expect kind of common sense is going to be very critical. In general, for state governments or federal governments or cities and towns, my personal opinion is that there should always be a human in the loop. You should never fully automate 100% of everything without human oversight. The technology is 3 years old, and it's not as much about trusting the output of the technology. It's trusting how the technology is calibrated, which is where most people don't understand the calibration output. So I would say that orchestration always needs a human touch. It's a very high touch function. The instrumentation is important, and the more vertically deep you get, the more human touch and governance you need.
Absolutely. So last question is, if you need to advise any government IT director or leader that wants to start to allocate budget for AI, where should they start? Tomorrow morning or Monday?
Yeah. This is kind of like my structured, MBA style bullet list, but I would say, yes, you should assess your governance tiers, which is, chat with the agency technology leadership to kind of assess where their content is, how ready their tools are for integration. Can they even communicate and publish status reports for anything? But I would say that I think number two should have been number one, which is calculating your AI cost with a fully burdened model is going to be very important. And you need to go back to the whiteboard and the drawing board and input all the different variables that the AI is intending on assessing, from models to training to licenses to compute costs to rewiring the workflows to integration costs to troubleshooting to publishing GA and production code, etc. That fully burdened cost is going to be very important. So all the variables that we were presenting earlier in the slide should actually serve as an input to your financial model. And mapping the workflow, you have to map the workflow because that will instantly say like, okay, stage 3 in the workflow costs us 40x more than stage 5. Why is that? Is there an opportunity to automate that stage, etc.? And the reason I put number 4 on a quarterly basis is the same argument, because the roadmaps are changing quarterly. And many times that the roadmap capabilities are being published and injected into your code without you knowing about it, because these are all non-functional requirements. These are not functional requirements. You don't see a functional output materially change. You will see something at the back end change. It's like, wait a minute, what is this? Why is there a link associated with this content? Those are the kind of things you need to be really careful. And right sizing the technology, I cannot stress this enough. Not everything needs AI. AI is great, but you don't have unlimited budget. So really, really pay attention to what and where AI becomes really important. But I would say that the one in orange, the recalculating your ROI model, first thing tomorrow morning, create your financial model, input all the variables, and do scenario planning. You don't need to have a CFA degree to do financial analysis anymore. That's the beauty. Punch it into Claude and see what the result is. And literally within less than half a day, you will figure out like, wow, this is 2x or 3x. Or it's like, oh, wow, this is actually much cheaper for me to inject AI into some of the use cases. So use case scenario planning and financial forecasting, it should be number one, which of course also means that you need an inventory of the use case you're addressing.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a couple of questions from the attendees soon. But before that, I'll just give a very quick overview of what Zappix is and what we do. So we are an AI customer engagement platform. We work in an outcomes as a service model where we are powered by a multimodal AI agent that really engages, shows, and resolves transactions, interactions in real time. We operate both for inbound and outbound interactions. And what we mean is inbound are all those interactions coming from the constituents, from the citizens, to your staff, to your contact center, to your access center, and we push them into self-service or collecting information to help the staff handle them much faster. And outbound, we have a very strong intelligent outreach that can send text, emails, robocalls, phone calls, conversational AI calls in a fully automated manner to improve the engagement with the residents and with the citizens. Lastly, as I said, we have a very strong multimodal AI agent that both is visual and voice-based. As you are talking with the agent, we can show you visually certain things, certain forms, etc. This is not a chatbot. It's not a platform you configure. We are the ones that are managing it end to end. And the goal is to provide measurable outcomes. And it's all about outcomes at the end. It's not about the technology, it's about outcomes. Understanding, as we've talked through this entire webinar, what are we trying to resolve, and then finding the best solution to resolve it. Whether it's improving the containment for inbound interactions, reducing the cost to serve, which is critical. How can you use digital tools, AI, automation to reduce the cost to serve, improve outbound response rate, and doing all of that while you are looking at the citizen experience and improving it. So I'd like to thank you again, Janak, and we'll open it to questions now. Shota, do we have any questions?
Yes, there should be in the chat below. It's something that only the hosts and panelists can see, but can you see that one, Yossi?
I do not see the questions.
Yeah, I see the question, Shota.
Okay,
The
perfect.
question is for everybody. You've been on the front lines of AI in government. Where do you see the public sector AI in 3 to 5 years? Are we heading towards a world where most citizen interactions are AI handled, or do you think the human element stays central in ways the private sector doesn't? My first reaction is anybody who's trying to predict 3 to 5 years is BS. There is no 3 to 5 years anymore. I would say it's three to 5 quarters. There's no years. So where do I see 3 to 5 quarters out? I would say that no, most citizen interactions are not AI handled in 3 to 5 quarters. There will absolutely be a human element. In fact, the human element will become more important, but it will reduce the noise attributed to all the different low intensity or low quality use cases that come through, which means that you're empowering the citizens, or my hope is that the state government empowers the citizens with tools that reduce and cut through some of the basic questions, which probably in some cases is 30, 40, even 60% of the volume, and empower the humans that are servicing the constituents with more high complexity use cases. And the human element will always stay central. And private sector will continue to remove the human element, unfortunately. And there are many concrete examples, from airlines to e-commerce companies to supply chain and logistics. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to reach somebody at an airline recently. It takes an average of about 35 to 40 minutes,
Yes.
Unless you're the highest tiered member. And you will have this endless death loop of AI prompts, which is impossible to navigate at this point. The government should not be doing that.
Absolutely. Any other questions there, Shota? I see the chat now. Okay, there's another question here. You talked about right-sizing technology and using RPA instead of AI for low complexity interactions. In practice, how do we draw that line? We have a mix of request types that I'm not sure how to categorize what's complex enough for AI and what should stay automated. Good question.
Yeah, I would say that things such as password resets, things such as forgotten login IDs, things such as I need a link for, or that categorization requires heavy agency engagement because the subject matter expertise needed to how fast you can answer or what are the nuances behind the response types is going to be very important. And it depends from state to state because of the regulation, policies, what have you. So I would say that the categorization for what's high complexity and where we can inject AI versus what's low complexity that can be fully automated or partially automated really depends on the agency and the context. It also, believe it or not, depends on how deep you want to go with the response. Sometimes an agency might decide that you don't want a response that's end to end, that you absolutely do want to redirect a constituent to a live agent to answer questions in a meaningful way. So the decision is going to be up to the agency's specific leadership to categorize what's low complexity and high complexity. For example, my team cannot sit and decide saying, oh, this is low complexity, this is high complexity. We rely on others and we educate other agency partners to say hey, you might want to think about this capability a certain way, but that's all we can do. Ultimately, it's up to the agencies.
And we typically use we call it the automation matrix, that we look at it by volume and by complexity.
Right.
And there's also a third dimension, which is also empathy needed. Are those when you want an agent to be involved? So there's becoming like a 3D model of AI, automation, and human agents that we need to look at and then map out all the use cases and then see, okay, how do you start to cluster them and assign some to AI, a lot probably to automation, and then some to human agents.
Yeah.
So I think we're about to wrap it up, and I'd like to thank you again, Janak. I really like this conversation. We try to make it really no hype, no theory, but practical. And
we have one more question. I can quickly try and answer it in 30 seconds. For agencies that don't have a mature contact center or CRM solution, where does the integration complexity actually sit? The integration complexity is actually in trying to exchange data across from the agency CRMs or the contact center agents. And in lack of a CRM system, how you package up the data and communicate becomes very archaic very fast, which means that this serves almost as a prereq. 6-month deployment, realistically, I would say that the first, it's a month for about discovery and assessment. It's about 4 to 6 weeks, I would say, for writing the specs and the requirements and doing scenario and pilot planning, and in about 4 to 6 weeks additional for getting to a first pilot use case. And I would say that you can realistically do this in 4 months, but for low complexity, kind of not so mature state systems, you're looking at about 6 months from start to finish.
Yeah.
And also, data quality and content maturity is also a huge part of this.
Yeah, and I think that it comes back to what you said at the beginning: data readiness, the AI data readiness, or even in information, you need data. And we like sometimes the phased approach. When the data is not ready, we put almost like a complementary solution on top of the existing CRM contact center solutions, solve the low-hanging fruit. There's always low-hanging fruit, solve them, and then start to work with the agency on getting the data ready, getting the maturity ready, and then start to handle more and more cases. So thank you so much. And thank you for attending this.
Thank you very much.
Webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And special thank you, of course, to Janak and Yossi for sharing their insights and expertise. We hope this webinar has been informative and valuable for you and your organization. And if you have any additional questions or would like to look into anything further, please feel free to reach out to Miles Lewis. Their contact information is currently displayed on your screen. Thank you so much, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.